Hey guys, welcome back to my channel. I hope you guys are great, fine and fantabulous. Today we are going to do a brief history lesson. There's so much things going on right now and I'm not happy with the lack of knowledge that I have on my black history. I'm not gonna lie, I'm getting very obsessed with researching, and the more I research is the more angry I'm getting, but I feel like it's very important for me to know my history. If I was gonna have a conversation, I wasn't able to kind of have an in-depth conversation that I can have now, and right now I'm even on like the tip of the iceberg. Like I'm literally just a pebble in the sea. I'm not even at where I wanna be. My mum, she knows history but she doesn't know too much, and my dad, he doesn't really know much about black history either, so it was up to me to basically go and do my research. I want to pass this information down to my daughter as well. Like I think it's important that she knows. If your parents don't know and then in school they're not teaching you, then how do you expect the knowledge to be passed on? Without further ado, let's just get into the video. In school, I feel like we are always taught about slavery and colonization. I know that slavery, it started in 1619. Portugal had brought over slaves. Technically, there was slavery going on before that, but in terms of the American slavery, yeah, Portuguese, basically they were on there. I know about the slavery starting in 1619 and technically ending in 1865 with the 13th Amendment, which is basically there's no more slavery. However, if you commit a crime, you can go to prison and technically you're a slave. That's a whole different matter, which I want to get into later. So we know about slavery, fair enough. We know about colonization, which is basically a country going into another country to gain power. This was more of a refresher course. So like for example, Angola speak Portuguese, Congo speak French. In Jamaica, you had the Spanish that went to go and invade. Did you know that Christopher Columbus, when he was trying to look for East India, but then he ended up going to the West Indies, which was the Caribbean islands, he actually went to the Portuguese first to ask them if they wanted to do it, and they were like, no, we're looking at a different way of going to Asia through Africa. So he went to the Spanish instead, and then the Spanish was like, yeah, let's go, and that's how they ended up coming to Jamaica. Did you know that? I didn't know that. I knew that the Spanish were there, but I didn't know that that was the whole story. Now I understand why the black people are furious when it comes to Christopher Columbus. Before I understood, but I didn't really understand too tough, but it's because he is basically saying, oh, I discovered these islands. But how can you discover something when there was already people there? They were indigenous. How can you say that you've discovered somewhere where there's already indigenous people there? How? You didn't discover it. That's why people are upset about that. And then obviously with the whole slavery situation, so that is understandable. And now I understand. Now I get the whole story. Now I get it. Another fact, I also found America is actually named after a guy whose name was Amerigo. So Christopher Columbus had passed without knowing that he actually discovered, I'm using these terms very lightly, okay? He discovered America. This Amerigo guy, I think he was Italian, discovered it, and so they named it after him instead. So that's how America got their name. They're named after this Amerigo guy. In case you haven't noticed, this whole topic is gonna be about like terms that like I didn't come across. So another term that I always used to hear, always, but I really didn't understand what the hell they were talking about, and that is Jim Crow laws. Jim Crow laws, all to do with segregation. Colored people, as they like to say, not being able to mix with white people. That's what Jim Crow laws was about. In case anyone wanted to know, where did the name Jim Crow come from? Jim Crow was a character portrayed to be what a typical black person, what white people see black people as. I kind of see it as Jim Crow laws is basically black laws. Laws for black people. No coloureds, no voting rights, you can't use the same water fountains as white people, you couldn't use the same restroom, you couldn't be in the same restaurant. Didn't know that that was what was called Jim Crow laws. The next term that I was brushing up on was lynching. So when I heard about lynching, I always thought that lynching was basically when they used to whip you on your back. As a word, just sounds like when they whip you up. But lynching is commonly known as basically when they used to hang the black people. Lynching is commonly associated with hanging. Most people think that hanging is the only form of lynching. It's a terrorized act on black people as a group. A premeditated killing by a group of people. It's mad that they had to put a law in place to basically stop lynching. Like, that is absolutely crazy. And then this basically leads on to when I learned about the 13th Amendment. It's against the law to basically be a slave. Jeez, the back of my head, I can feel it. But there's a clause about you basically being in jail, so any little minor crime. So that's how I personally feel systematic racism started. That's when they just started getting all the black people for low offenses and then bringing them into jail. I feel like we use the word systemic or systematic. Which one is it? I also had to look into this and figure out which one is which. From my understanding, systemic comes from systematic. Systematic, when you put things in place, you methodically plan, you do it on purpose to make sure things are in place for racism. Practices of the systematic racism then becomes systemic. So, for example, systemic is the outcome of systematic. Yeah, I said it right. Systematic is usually classed as institutionalization or racism. There's been this video going around explaining systemic racism, and where they were talking about how people were placed in particular areas on purpose, and I feel like because of that, that's now called systemic racism. However, racism, I understand why people are confused, because technically you can use both terms for racism. Racism can be systematic and it can also be systemic. Like, for example, Grenfell. So before, when people would be like, oh, it's institutional racism, I used to be like, what are these people on? Like, don't get me wrong, what they did was absolutely wrong and it wasn't right, but I could never understand why they would say that it was institutionalized racism. However, it makes sense. Now I understand why people are saying that, because where they were located, the type of people, the minorities that were in that building, they systematically put them there, and then systemically didn't look after them. They discriminated against them. They didn't hear their cries. They didn't uphold the safety of the building. So that's why it is basically systematic but also systemic. Black people make up 3% of the population in the UK, and 14% of them are in prison. Why is that? 17% of black people are more likely to be charged and convicted of low-level offences off of stop and search in comparison to white people, who are only 5%. Make that make sense. Make it make sense. Examples of systemic racism: Stephen Lawrence. What about his killers? What, like, where were the convictions for that? Belly Mujinga and Trevor Belle, both people who were targeted because of the whole spitting situation. What's going on in their situation? There's no justice for any of them. Like, what's going on with them? Nothing's been done. An even more recent incident is Shukri Abdi. Bloody hell! How can you tell me that that's right? Like, what? The girl didn't even know how to swim, and you're here talking about it was a hot day, so she wanted to take a cool off and go into the river and swim to cool off. That is just absolutely ridiculous. There's even bite marks on her. It's ridiculous. It's absolutely ridiculous. Institutionalizational racism. And then what even got me mad yesterday is that I then decided to do some research on Sarah Reid. The video alone got me mad. And you know what got me even more mad? The guy only got 150 days of probation. 150 days of probation. Where the hell is the justice? Where the hell is the justice in that? I don't get it. When the evidence is there, they just don't do anything with it. Like, come on. The evidence is there. The evidence is there, and they're not doing anything about it. Then another term was racial gaslighting that I didn't understand. People use manipulation with their words, manipulating information to make the victim basically second guess their experience. So, for example, have you ever been in a situation with a person of an opposite race, and they'll make a joke that is clearly racist, or it has some underlying racial tone to it, and they'll be like, calm down, it was only a joke. Oh yeah, but so and so people are racist too. Why is it always about race? You're always throwing your race card about. But let's just play devil's advocate here. Or I don't think they were being racist, or in my opinion, that weren't racist, but it's never just this is what it is. And in my opinion, I feel like it comes off as a form of microaggression. So microaggression is basically brief, common daily communication, intentional and unintentional, transmitting derogatory or negative messages to a person due to belonging to a stigmatized group. I know us women have heard this. Can I touch your hair?
This one drives me mad.
I'm not a pet. You don't come and stroke me. Like, before I used to be like,
oh yeah, like, why not? It's just hair, like, I'm sure I can come up to you.
Now I'm reading upon history, and you know, back in the day they used to have human zoos. It kind of has that underlying link. Now I understand why people are like, no, you don't get to touch my hair. You don't get to pet me like I'm some animal. I get this all the time. My full name doesn't sound like the typical black name, as people like to say, and then when they hear me they're like, oh, you sound very articulate, or you don't sound black at all. What is sounding black? What is that? What is sounding black? What is that? If I said, oh, you sound white, what is that? So basically you're trying to say that black people can't articulate themselves properly, is what you're trying to say. You're basically trying to say that we're animals and we're aggressive and we don't know how to string sentences together. You're so aggressive. This one, oh, if it's one to grind my gears, you are so aggressive. I hate that one so much. I hate it so much because I feel like I can't get overexcited. I can't talk about something that I'm passionate about. If someone else should talk about it,
oh, they're so passionate, oh yeah, they're driving for this change.
If I speak up about something, or if a black person gets very, very emotional, it's,
oh, you're so aggressive, man, you're so aggressive.
I hate that so much. I hate it, I hate it, I hate it. It's annoying as flip. Oh, you're pretty for a black girl. Pretty for a black girl basically implies that you can't just be pretty as a black girl. You have to basically you must be mixed with something, or being black alone is just not pretty. This one I didn't actually think about until recent, where people say, oh, you're a strong black woman, or you can take it. But basically what they're saying is that because you're a strong black woman, you can handle all this oppression, you can handle all of these struggles, you can handle all of the abuse, because you'll bounce back up from it. It's nothing. And you know what? I came across on Twitter the other day this guy that basically said, oh, women will always be the weakest link. How can you expect us to be so strong when you're constantly tearing us down, tearing us down, tearing us down? We're only human too, you know? And then because we're black, we need to be strong on top of it? No. You're having a laugh, mate. This then leads on to, in my opinion, appropriation. So I knew what appropriation is. In my own words, I feel like appropriation is when you take something from another culture and then you try to rebrand it as if it's yours, and you're not going to give credit where credit's due. One thing that annoys me is braids. When it comes to braids, me as a black woman, I'm not gonna lie, I'm guilty. When it comes to like having job interviews or stuff, I try not to wear braids because I feel like it might deter me from getting the job. There have been people like Kylie Jenner, Kim Kardashian, when they have braids and all of a sudden it's now a trend and they've started it, and it's like, no, give credit where credit's due. If a black person was to have braids, it's deemed as, oh, you're unprofessional, it's not as neat. That was literally that's just literally even just a brief amount of the research that I've done. I was literally gonna do another video that was basically like things that I should know from a black British history point of view, and things that I should know from a Jamaican history point of view. But to be honest, it's so exhausting that I'm just not gonna do another video after this. Like, this is it. If you want it, reply below and I'll do it. But to do it voluntarily, I'm done. I am exhausted. Like, I'm exhausted coming across all this information. Is very, very, very overwhelming. I'm literally just gonna leave two other things that I found out. One is Uncle Tom. So I wanted to know why it was offensive to use the word Uncle Tom. Uncle Toms were basically seen as submissive, the black submissive slaves to the white people. They'll do anything. They don't even want to get away from slavery. They'd rather stay where they are. So if someone calls you an Uncle Tom, they're basically trying to call you a submissive slave. Number two, Aunt Jemima. Now this one is even a hard one for me because I love Aunt Jemima pancakes. But did you know that Aunt Jemima, the original character that was on the box, was basically a mammy? And a mammy is the female version of Uncle Tom. They will even risk their life. They don't even want to leave. And they use that as the original, like, model for the Aunt Jemima pancakes. And then after that, now they've changed it and now it's a maid. But just knowing that, I'm kind of torn. Like, do I really want to mess with Aunt Jemima like that? Like, I know that they've rebranded, but knowing that the foundation of the packaging today came from that, boy, And if someone calls you Aunt Jemima, they're calling you a female Uncle Tom. Just to round up everything and to tell you where I got all my information from, I've been watching so much. So like I've looked on things on YouTube, but also if you've got Netflix, I have been watching... I watched 13th, which basically teaches you about the 13th Amendment. Now I even understand why people don't like Hillary Clinton and Bill Clinton. Now I understand why black people have trust issues when it comes to them. Explain the racial wealth gap. That basically talks about the systemic and systematic racial issue that we have, and that's why now there's so much of a gap in terms of black people owning stuff and having land. If you also want to stay on the racial wealth kind of topic, you might want to also research the Black Wall Street. Yeah. I watched Fruitvale Station, which was the story of Oscar Grant III. That one had me in tears. Like, that was just so sad. That one really, really had me in tears. But that's a real life story. A man that was shot by police in 2009. The Khalif Browder story I watched time ago. That was when I then first realized that there was a place called Rikers Island. If I was you, I would take some time to watch that documentary. It can be a bit much, but it's very interesting. LA 92, I also watched. That was touching upon the LA riots. When I watched that, I was a bit like, oh no, we went too far. I'm not saying it was right, it was not, far from, but maybe that's me coming from no longer being a black and white situation. It's now me coming off of humanity. Like, it's just not right doing these to people. You also learn about Rodney King. He was the guy that basically got stopped by police officers and he got beaten up. And if it wasn't for the gentleman, I think his name was George Holiday, it was a white guy, he filmed it and released that footage, and that's how everyone knew about the incident. But the police got off. They also talk about Latasha Harlin was accused of stealing something from the shop by a Korean shopkeeper, and she shot her in the head. It's very, very interesting. It's about 2 hours long, but it's very, very informative. It is a lot of information. It's a lot to take in. It's very, very exhausting. There's been times when I've cried and Jimo's been like, okay, you need to stop. There's times when like I'm literally on the laptop researching up until like 2, 3 o'clock in the morning, and Jimo's like, okay, enough is enough. But I feel like it's very important that we know this information. But I feel like I've gone into now this rabbit hole where I just can't stop. Like, I need to know everything. I just need to know what's going on. So anyway, let me know what you learned from this video. If there's things that you didn't really know much about, let me know. If there's any things that I should look into that you think would also be beneficial to me. And if you like this video, give it a big thumbs up. Don't forget to comment, like, and subscribe. Share it around as well. And if anything, I will see you in the next video. Peace.